Next, we will continue with regular agenda item. In this case, item number 15, SWAGS Rezoning, case number 2ZN 2023. Brian Clough, our presenter and development area manager. Please proceed. Thank you.
Yes, good evening again, Mayor Ortega and council members. The next request on the agenda related to 2ZN 2023 is a proposal for a rezoning request by the applicant for a restaurant called SWAGS. Specifically, this request before you is for approval of a zoning district map amendment that's requesting to change from the C2 P3 DO, which is a commercial district with our P3 parking overlay and downtown overlay, to our downtown district with the downtown multiple use type 3 and also maintaining the P3 parking overlay and the DO overlay with amended development standards for proposal of a new 3-story restaurant at 7323 East Schumann on a 0.29 gross acre site. So this site is located within our Old Town area. You can see it in the entertainment district here south of Camelback Road and east of Scottsdale Road. A closer look at the site here shows it at the intersection of Schumann Lane and North Wells Fargo Drive. There is an existing building on the site that has historically functioned as a restaurant and bar use. And you can see it is directly adjacent to the Galleria Corporate Center parking structure. Also, you can see to the north the Maya Day Club and also the Maya Hotel that's currently under construction. This is the zoning map depicting the existing zoning on the site of C2P3 with the downtown overlay and the requested zoning of downtown multiple use type 3 with the P3 parking overlay and downtown overlay. As I mentioned, the site is within our Old Town area and within the Old Town Character Area Plan, shown there towards the northeast quadrant. This is the site location relative to the Old Town future land use map. This depicts it within the downtown multiple use area, which corresponds to the DMU land use request in the D district. And then also within the development types of our Old Town Character Area Plan, depicting it within the type 3 area, which is the area of our Old Town area that allows the highest intensity of uses, height, and density. This is the proposed conceptual site plan for the new building. It is a 3-story building shown on the corner of the street there, as you can see. As part of the proposal, the applicant would be constructing all new public sidewalks around the building with a 10-foot wide width. I'll also point out the bulb out that you see at the corner here is new. That's currently not there, so that would help slow vehicles around the corner in this pedestrian-oriented environment, as well as provide additional refuge area for pedestrians. There's an existing patio on the east side of the building here that the existing building used historically. The applicant is proposing to maintain that. It's in the city's right-of-way and has been subject to a prior license agreement between the owner and the city of Scottsdale for use of that patio. That would be required to go through the adequate process for that license for this new user as they intend to use it going forward. The building is about 9,100 square feet. I mentioned 3 stories. On the rear of the property is a driveway that enters off of Wells Fargo, and you can see in this red box back here, there are 12 on-site spaces in that area, and this property owner has rights to 8 of those parking spaces. So those would be 8 physical on-site parking spaces available for the users of the proposed restaurant. These are conceptual elevations of the proposed building. I mentioned it's a 3-story building. The highest part of the building is around 56 feet in height. A summary of some of the project information. I mentioned 9,100 square feet and 3 stories. That building height, 56, possibly reaching 58 in certain areas. The district that it's within in the downtown would allow up to 84 feet in height. Parking required for the use is 30.52 parking spaces. The parking provided is those 8 on-site spaces that I mentioned, as well as 18.5 P3 parking credits. And these P3 credits are associated with the P3 parking overlay that I mentioned that is currently on the property and provides a credit to the site based on the area of P3. So that's where those 18.5 credits come from. As well as 4.02 in-lieu parking spaces. Those in-lieu spaces are spaces that are leased from the city to the property owner to help meet their parking requirement. Also, in addition to those spaces, 14 physical spaces are going to be provided through private agreement that the property owner or the applicant has entered into with another property owner nearby towards the west on Schuman Lane. Those are 14 physical parking spaces that would be available between the hours of 5 p.m. and 2 a.m. I'll note those 14 spaces are not required to meet their parking requirement. They meet the parking requirement with the 8 on-site spaces and the in-lieu and P3 parking credits. So the 14 spaces in the private agreement are not required by the city. They're voluntarily being offered by the applicant through private agreement as part of this request. Additionally, with the request, the applicant is asking for amended development standards for certain components of the site design. The downtown overlay allows this for the city council to grant amended development standards for small parcels, which are parcels that are 20,000 square feet or less. One of the requests is regarding the building setback, and this is on the Schuman Lane side, on the north side of the building. So the red line here is a 20-foot building setback, which would typically be required by the downtown district. The applicant is requesting to amend that down to 13'7", shown with the blue line. That request would allow the building to be about in line with the other building fronts on the same frontage of the street. On the Wells Fargo side, there's no amendments proposed with regard to the building setback. And then the second request related to amended development standards is the building step back. So that's more of the 3-dimensional massing, where when the building gets to a certain height, the mass should be pushed back. And similarly, the red line here indicates what the typical step back would be in the downtown district, and then the blue would be the requested. So essentially, this line is being moved north in line with the building setback, and then also the point at which the building massing would start stepping back is being increased by around 8 to 9 feet. And then similarly on the east side on the Wells Fargo frontage, there's no amendment proposed, and the building meets the requirements on that side. Throughout the public outreach, there weren't a whole lot of comments received initially. As it started going through the process, we started to hear a little bit more. Even these numbers that are on the screen right now aren't completely accurate because some more has come in since this presentation was made. So we have received a few comments in opposition. We've also received 4 or 5, a handful of comments in support of the request. And then the applicant did provide a petition in support that was signed by multiple property owners. And then I'll also note that the city did receive a legal protest that was submitted in opposition to the proposed development by property owners in the area. And that legal protest did make up 20% or more of the properties surrounding the proposed development, which makes that legal protest valid. And that valid legal protest requires 5 votes of council for approval as opposed to the typical 4. And again, the action requested this evening on the screen here, and that concludes staff's presentation. Happy to answer any questions, and again, the applicant is also prepared for a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the applicant. Then there are requests for public comment. Then we'll move to public comment after the applicant presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Court Rich. I'm honored to be here before you tonight to represent this fine dining establishment that would like to be located in downtown Scottsdale. With me tonight is the development team, along with the owner, Aaron Wagner, who himself is owner of over 100 restaurants around the country, and really excited about this opportunity. So let me jump into it. You know the location, but here's what we have. As you can tell, it's sort of, if you're going to open a restaurant, this is a great location. There are a number of, there's apartments, there's the hotels. It's in the heart of it all. It makes sense to have this here. The current building is what I think we can all agree would not be ideal for the situation. It's not a pretty building. It doesn't do anything beneficial for the area. And instead, what Mr. Wagner would like to do is come in and build something that I think we can all agree is significantly superior to what is there today. He's going to invest millions of dollars to do that. And I will say, I know there's some controversy around this case, and I'll get to it, but with regard to whether this is a restaurant or a bar, he is fully aware that if he were to want to operate a bar, this entire investment would be at risk and at risk of being lost, because he cannot do that with his current zoning and the zoning that he's asking you all for. So keep that in mind as we talk. It is a restaurant, and in fact, the neighbors who are here today, and we've had a chance to work with, that filed the protest, even at the Planning Commission meeting, when the Planning Commission voted 7-0 in favor of this, they indicated, if it is a restaurant, we're in full support. And I haven't heard from anyone in all of Scottsdale that's against this as a restaurant. And it is a restaurant, so let me tell you a bit more about it. As I mentioned, Mr. Wagner, and I'll take a minute, SWAGS, why is it called SWAGS? His last name is Wagner, and his business is called WAGS, that's his investment company. So someone asked me why it's called SWAGS, but that's why it's called that. They don't operate bars. They have a Series 12 liquor license. You just went through this with the Series 6 license and the use permit about a bar. There's no bar use permit, there's no Series 6 license. He knows he can't do any of that stuff, or else those millions of dollars that he's investing in this property could all be lost. Again, the bar requires a CUP, and we're agreeing to aggressive noise reduction stipulations. I'll take you through those. At the Planning Commission, we agreed, I think we're the only restaurant and maybe the only landowner in the entire city that has this stipulation, certainly one of the only. We're not going to exceed 68 decibels of noise when they measure it across the street. Now it's already louder than that out there, so we have to be quieter than what's already going on in the area in order to comply with this stipulation. This will, if you wanted to do a bar, this is not compatible with operating a bar, obviously. So 68 decibels, again, that's like a normal conversation level. This is going to be a restaurant. Further, the speakers, to the extent there are any outside, this stipulation, again, is unique, I think, for restaurants. They have to be pointed in and downward to make sure that none of this music or noise or anything that would come out of them would be projected out. And that's in his interest because he has that very strict stipulation to keep the noise levels very low. So we were really happy to be able to sit down and work with the neighbors and talk through some stipulations that we agreed to propose, and we agreed to propose these stipulations to you all, and in exchange they agreed to remove the legal protest. Well, we're still here proposing the stipulations, but they haven't removed the legal protest. But what I want to tell you is that I understand that there's some consternation from your city attorney's office or your staff about these stipulations. We ask that you approve them, but even without them, I want to explain why this makes all the sense in the world and why these are more of a belt and suspenders situation. One of the stipulations is no Series 6 license shall be sought for the property. We're happy to agree to that because, as you know, we need a use permit to operate a bar anyway. So we cannot operate a bar. Even if your city attorney tells you or your staff tells you don't put this stipulation on there, which we want you to because we worked really hard with the neighbor for it, but even if they say don't put it on there, it doesn't mean we can go operate a bar because we cannot. We have to come back to you all for a CUP if we ever want to do a bar in this location. The next one, with regard to the subwoofers and the no DJs, no live bands, we can't do DJs or live bands without a live entertainment use permit. We already have a stipulation that says that as much, and that's just the law in the city. And so both of these, with or without them, Mr. Wagner would be putting his millions of dollars that he's going to invest in this property at risk if he were here really trying to do a bar that's going to be loud and have bands and DJs. He can't do that. This makes it even clearer, and we support the neighbor, and we are happy to work with him on this, and we hope you'll do it. And we think It's consistent with a lot of the different types of stipulations that you've adopted over not only late history, but recent history as well. I know I'm kind of running out of time, so I'll click through some of these. There was a case earlier this year where it was zoned I-1, but you allowed uses in IG and I-1 to be utilized in the same zone. That was just in February for the Desert Cove self-storage. And my point with this is I'm just going to run through a few. I think you do stipulations kind of like this all the time. Again, we don't need them, but I think you can do them. You did some stuff around the ratio of types of beds within a residential healthcare facility. You know, you typically get involved in business and what's going to be going on there. You know, with the High Street project, you got really involved in like unique water stuff, I think, and things like that you know are very atypical. But again, we're the applicant. We're asking you to do this. This isn't something you're forcing on us and we're going to complain about. So I hope you'll do it. But again, if you don't, we still can't do any of that stuff. So let me get going. We have a great deal of community support. We've been out to the neighborhood. These green dots are the neighboring property owners, business owners, and residents that have signed our petition in support. You'll see that grayed out area. That's represented by the neighbor who filed the opposition, right? And I think you have a letter of opposition. It's from another business partner of theirs too. I'm not aware of anyone unaffiliated with the neighbor that's had any issues with this project. And so let me take you through parking, because in addition to the issue around restaurant, I think parking's the other thing that we've heard the most about. As your staff said, 30.52 spaces are required. My point in all this is to tell you we're going above and beyond. There's 8 spaces on site. There are P3 credits, and this isn't something new. The existing site can use those P3 credits, so we're not inventing new P3 credits. And then there's 4 in lieu spaces. Now that in and of itself, we meet the requirements, but we've gone above that and gone out and gotten 14 physical spaces within 530 feet. Again, they didn't have to do that, but we want to do that. And then you can actually add an additional, for valeting in those spaces, you can fit in another 9. So that gets you up to 23 spaces for a total of 53.49 spaces. Now, at the bottom of the screen there is sort of, maybe I'm burying the lead, but you saw they're right next to the giant parking garage. Like, you can't get better parking, right? And so the Galleria is stipulated to have 187 public spaces at all times and an extra 200 valet spaces in that garage on the nights on the weekend there. Let me just show you on a map where these things are. The yellow box is our building, and there's the 8 spaces right behind it. There's the off-site spaces that we signed up. And then obviously there's the Galleria. There's another look at the 8 spaces. Let me just show you, because we went out and the Galleria really does present a very easy parking opportunity here. Here it is. We went out a Friday, Saturday, Sunday taking pictures of, I mean, there are, you know, 8 or 9 stories of vacant parking there every night of the week for whatever that's worth. But also there's sufficient parking, just the public parking that's allowed. So I think that's all I've got. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And Mr. Wagner's here also to say a few words. I know he signed in as public comment, but however he can get his time.
Okay, well, we can receive public comment, if that's okay. Good. So let's go to public comment. I'll call you forward, state your name, place of address. You've got a minute and a half left there, Mr. Rush. So let's go to Tim Lasota, Aaron Wagner, and Brian Banks. In this case, Tim Lasota was granted, there were 2 other speakers that granted their time to Mr. Lasota, so instead of 3 minutes, it'll be 5 minutes maximum.
Thank you,
Aaron Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I am Timothy Lasota, and I'm actually here on behalf of 4 clients: Maya Hotel Equity Partners Group, Stockdale Galleria project owner, and Stockdale Galleria landowner. And Last time we were here, I think it was Councilwoman Janik who said she'd appreciate it if the applicant and the opposing party would go back and discuss this. We did, and we still disagree with the applicant on the necessity for the stipulations, but the bottom line is we did go back and we discussed stipulations and we came to an agreement as to those stipulations. Certainly in our mind, it was contingent upon the presentation of stipulations that were adopted by council, and we are willing to drop the legal protest if the stipulations are included. But if they're not, we view the stipulations as critical to protecting our interests. So if those stipulations can't be adopted because the staff's position is credited, and I'll get to that in a minute, but there would be another option for the applicant, and that would be a deed restriction. So that's what we would tell the applicant is if the staff can't adopt the stipulations, there's a deed restriction way to go also that could garner our support and our withdrawal of the legal protest. Now, in terms of the stipulations, I do want to talk about that, and I want to talk, there's been some talk about, well, you got to get a conditional use permit anyway. We view and that's true, but we view a stipulation as being more powerful than a conditional use permit requirement, and one of the reasons is the legal protest. There's no legal protest for conditional use permit. It's not a legislative zoning act, as opposed to removing a stipulation is actually it's a zoning case. So it has to go through the full public process. There's also the potential referability, and the legal standard is different. The council has just about unfettered discretion to turn down a rezoning. It's not that way with a conditional use permit. It's just not the type of protection we're looking for, which is why we sat down and tried to hammer that out. We also think the live entertainment stipulation that we've offered, or excuse me, we've suggested, is necessary. It's not covered by existing law. So we do think those are necessary. Now, in terms of I know there's been some discussion already about whether this can be done. I certainly agree with Mr. Rich that the city has agreed to any number of stipulations over the years. We just had it was the 40 Love bar in here, and they, I don't know, and it was picked up by Councilman Durham, and one of the things in there is they are a Series 6 liquor license, but the city of Scottsdale went ahead and required that they have 15% space devoted to a kitchen. Well, Series 6 doesn't have to sell any food. So, the state liquor department, I think, gives cities, unincorporated counties, I think they give you very wide discretion on the type of zoning to adopt. The other thing I noticed in there is the hours are 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's also in the stipulations for 40 Love. Well, under state law, you can open a bar at 6 a.m. So, I mean, we're already in the business of essentially adopting these stipulations that I think are critical to zoning cases because they allow parties who otherwise cannot agree. This is a perfect example. They allow compromise. And if you get rid of the stipulations, you don't allow them, I think you eliminate that. I think one of the other things is, the notion that you can have a requirement in your code that you've got to go, every single bar, every single Series 6 has to go and get a conditional use permit, and that's okay, and yet for one single project, if you stipulate essentially to that as part of the zoning case, you're going to incur the wrath of the Department of Liquor or anyone else. I just don't see that happening. I think the two are, I think that what we're asking for here, I think is much less burdensome on the state regulatory requirement than the CUP requirement is, and no one's ever suggested that was illegal. So I think at the end of the day, we would ask that we are looking for stipulations, and they're essentially to bar live entertainment, DJs, et cetera, and that a Series 6 liquor license not be attached to this property. We do think it's critically important. We disagree with the applicant in that regard, and that basically makes it into a completely, making that as part of the zoning case makes that a completely sort of political decision on the part of the council, as opposed to kind of a CUP which is more administrative and more check the box. We think it's critically important. We have a big investment in the Maya Hotel. We want to make all this work. We've worked very hard to do so. And last thing I'll say is Councilman Durham talked about, well, is it a bar or is it a restaurant? We just want to make sure this stays a restaurant and does not create noise that really causes a problem for a hotel and frankly puts us out of compliance with our covenants to our lender. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this point, we will move on to other public comment. We have Aaron Wagner and Brian Banks.
Hi, Aaron Wagner. I'm the applicant. I'm the founder of WAGS Capital and the restaurateur managing partner of all of the restaurants, including the proposed SWAGS. How much time do I have, Mayor?
You have 3 minutes?
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Great. So just as a formal introduction to all the council, I grew up in Canada. I'm an immigrant here to the United States. Came when I was 17 years old on a football scholarship. And played college football and got a degree and went on to play professional football. And I've really viewed the United States as an incredible place where anybody can really pursue the American dream. And I think my life is kind of the epitome of that. I've been married 18 years, the same woman. I have 7 children with her. And 2 years ago, we bought a home here in Scottsdale. We love Scottsdale. We're looking for a new home here right now because we love it so much. We're based out of Utah. I've been there for over 15 years. And when we first started visiting here, because my 2 older girls golf, they're both ranked top 5 in the world, 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, we just fell in love with the place and we really wanted to be here. And I had the opportunity to buy this building, and I've been in this business and bringing high-end restaurants for a long period of time. I think, Court hammered it pretty hard, but I'm not in the bar business. I don't operate any bars. All of the operations that I do in my company are restaurants. And so that's the only thing that we intend to use this building for and operate as a restaurant. We're excited to do so. We think it's a great location for that because of everything that's around it. The last couple things that I just wanted to touch on were, with there being some opposition previous to this, we were able to sit down with Sean Yari's group and the neighbors, and I personally and Court, we went in there on their home turf for 3 hours. We sat down with Mr. Yari personally and his entire team, their council, their operating partners, all of the above, and it was a really amicable discussion. I think one thing that they could probably support is that there was some pretense misunderstandings about who I was and what my intent was for the property going into that meeting, and I was able to make it very, very clear that those weren't the case, and I think we found some very common ground. In terms of these stipulations, I hope that they can be put in place just for the ease of this taking place, because me knowing, really the only person knowing the true intent of this location and what this project is for me, I think this is just my easiest path. I've been at this almost 2 years now and spent over $500,000 just in this process through legal. So at this point, I really just want to be able to open a great restaurant and feed the residents of Scottsdale. With that being said, with all due respect to the opposition, I totally agree with Rich in the sense that I don't believe they're necessary. I never thought they were necessary. I've just only been agreeing to them because I felt like there's been a really tough path to go against somebody that's done a lot of great things for this community with Sean Yari's group. They have some incredible properties. They've invested a lot. He shared that with me, and I can respect that, and I'm hoping to get there as well. So I hope you guys will support it either way, and appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you. Next, we have Brian Banks.
How you doing, members of the council? I'm here as really just a neutral third party. I'm just a resident of Scottsdale, live within earshot of the entertainment district. I hear it every night. It doesn't bother me too much. So I can respect some of their concerns with the noise level. I don't think it would be a concern. I really have no dog in the fight. I met Mr. Wagner an hour ago. I don't know the other side. I know some of the great projects that the other side has done. I think that this project would be a lovely use for the building. Like I said, I live in the area, and the more competition, the more restaurants I can eat at, the happier I am. As I said, neither here nor there. I hope you guys approve this project. It's going to be great for the community, and I'm excited to have more entrepreneurs like Mr. Wagner in our community. Just producing for all of us. The more, the merrier. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, let's get back to Mr. Court if you'd like to respond to any particular points, and then I have a question or two for you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. A couple things, and thanks for the opportunity to respond. First, there was a notion that there should be a deed restriction or a private sort of way of settling this issue, and we've certainly used those in other zoning disputes, but these are really two competitors. This isn't sort of a homeowner and a business complex going in next door, and it's just, we think it's not a feasible position to give a competitor of your industry an ownership interest in your property, and so that's just a non-starter. Again, with the backdrop of we don't really need this to accomplish the goals that I think are already accomplished by the stipulations that are in place. With regard to the notion that it's stronger to have the stipulation in the zoning than the CUP, you all turn down conditional use permits for bars whenever you want. I know throughout the years I've represented many of those bars that have come before this council, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And I have no doubt, especially after we're up here swearing up and down and showing you that this will never be a bar, I certainly wouldn't represent Mr. Wagner coming back up here asking you for a CUP for a bar on this site. It makes no sense, and I would fully expect you all to say no to that. So, we think this is a great project. I never imagined in a million years that proposing a nice restaurant in the downtown would have this much controversy and this much craziness, and I'm sorry that it's come to that for you all. But I'm happy to now stop and answer any questions. We've got our traffic engineer here as well. If you have questions about that, our design team and Mr. Wagner is available as well.
Good. Yeah, I have a couple questions. First of all, just fundamentally, what would the building look like, the restaurant look like, if it just was built under the same zoning that it has already? And I say that because there seem to be many parking tricks, and I've been around downtown and in lieu and other purposes. So what would it look like if it were just the zoning was as is?
The extra footage, the extra area for more tables to make it make business sense. And so they need that rooftop area, which allows a third floor of tables. And it's really about the revenue for the business. So right now we could do 2 stories, but we would not be able to do the rooftop area. And that would not economically make sense for the applicant.
Well, and then secondly, you've asked for amended standards, which would be, in this case, brought forward to the curb and then ascend, and then, change. Why couldn't you ask for an amended standard that maybe did that, but then step back at the second or third floor? The reason I'm saying that is because it's crowding the street, in my opinion, and an amended standard doesn't have to be all or nothing. I mean, taking that same angle, whereas a tier or a wedding cake might be another solution with possible terraces, on the second floor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I know that there are challenges, again, with the size of the site and how much space we have to operate and to utilize. I don't know if anyone wants to have a comment on that as well. Thank you. If I can, if Mr. Wagner can.
One of the easiest answers to that, Mr. Mayor, is first, the amended standard of moving the setbacks closer toward the street mostly was to give me more of a footprint on the property, because if you noticed, it was a really small site. It's 0.29 acres. So it's public information. I paid $4.5 million for this tiny little building. And to get an extra 6 feet is a big deal in terms of seating to be able to make the numbers work, to make this work. In addition to that, we wouldn't have asked if it actually changed, but if you look at the entire street, all we're doing is actually bringing our building out to the exact same level as all the other buildings that are on that street. So it's not like we're protruding out, we're actually just trying to level up with the rest of the street.
Okay. There's a couple other questions from council. Let me, since you're up there too,
Yeah.
you know, I believe we should have shaded walkways.
Can you say that?
Shaded walkways, and I know this is conceptual, but sometimes this bulky mass ends up being what we get. And shaded walkways is what makes it interesting, whether you have some outdoor dining or not. Now, that's not a, well, I don't see it in your project, and it's something that I tend to talk to people about because it's a trademark of Scottsdale, and it's a really a welcoming aspect, especially on a gateway project like this. Councilwoman Caputi, you have a question?
Not a question. Thank you, Mayor. I just want a motion to recess to exec session, please.
Okay, so we have a motion to recess
Second.
to executive session. We have a second. What this means is we'll be able to consult with our attorneys regarding this. City Attorney, any other explanation? What we do and say is pertaining to legal matters and in this particular case, the zoning case itself. Seeing no other further comment, please record your vote to go into the executive session. Thank you. We're unanimous. Ready? And wait on Kathy. Kathy. We have returned from the jury box. Oh, wait, we have returned from executive session, and we'll resume our regular scheduled meeting. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to start by making a motion to continue the case to whatever the clerk decides is best, which is January 25th, January of next, 9th? Did January 9th available? Whatever the first available?
Councilman Caputi, the two dates are January 9th and January 23rd.
Then I motion to continue the case to the January 9th, 2024.
Second.
Excuse me, we have the city attorney for a second.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilwoman Caputi. Perhaps we could ask the applicant if that's a date where they'll be able to come and appear and talk to the council about their case.
So before we get a second, we have the representative for the applicant, and there is an opportunity to discuss a continuance and the grounds for whether one would be granted at this time. But just on the point of whether we don't have a second yet on the continuance, did you have any comment?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Caputi, I certainly would be interested in knowing what you'd like us to try to do over the next month. If there's some input that you could have for us that would help as we evaluate this. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll call on Vice Mayor Whitehead.
I think I'll fill in some for that. So there is some conflicts that we're dealing with that are legal in nature, which is why we had the exec session, in that there's some private agreements that would be beneficial. Both sides have agreed that these stipulations would be good, but they're not stipulations this council's going to make. So we would like to, in my opinion, I think this is an excellent project. And it fills a tiny little spot and with a nice upscale restaurant, but because of the challenges between the parties, and also I had negotiated with the applicant regarding a private parking lease, which I'd like to see that included in the packet, even though the city's not a party to that and we don't enforce that. It would be good to have that included. So I would say there's a few loose ends on our end that I personally would like to see. And referring to Councilwoman Janik's stern direction from the last time, I think additional communication between the two parties, but the city cannot be the principal in this case. So I hope that helps, and I'm seconding the
Oh,
motion.
good. So you did second it, the motion. At this point, we're going to have a discussion, but I see the applicant has also had direct discussion. Could you come up? That would be great, Brian. And we'll discuss the continuance, but go ahead.
Yeah, what I'd like to understand a little bit more, and I appreciate you sharing that, Councilwoman Whitehead, but what else needs, I'd really like to get a clear scope. With all due respect, I've been at this 2 years, and just in the last 2 months spent 6 figures in legal fees to get to this point. There's not a city in the entire country that bringing a nice restaurant to a dilapidated building would be this difficult. So just let me ask you this. I've dotted every I, I've crossed every T. This parking agreement signed, we could provide it today. With all due respect, another continuance for me, which if that's all I can get, I'll take it, because I don't want the deal to be put to bed. But at the end of the day, like, me even agreeing with my neighbor in these things, I feel is very irrelevant to you guys just approving the project that I've met every single thing they've asked for. I've gone over and above on parking, on noise. I'm already compliant everywhere. And so I just, if I'm going to be asked to do another continuance and keep spending money and keep waiting, which is my livelihood, I really want a comprehensive look of what I have to win at for the next month or whatever that period of time is, because I'm just getting strung along, and it's really, really hard.
I'll add my 2 cents worth, and I'll let my colleagues fill in. I support this project, but we've had both your side, the applicant, you, the applicant, and the owner, ask us to put stipulations in this that we cannot, and we've had that from the party that did the legal protest. So I personally would like to see that request go away, and I preferably would like to see the legal protest go away, but that doesn't affect my vote.
Okay, Councilmember Graham, again, we're speaking directly to the continuance or providing more information to the applicant. Appreciate the question. Councilmember Graham, Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the question for the parliamentarian, the protest requires or allows 3 votes would be a no. Is that correct? It would be a denial?
The protest requires, well, with the protest,
Yeah.
to approve the zoning case requires 5 votes.
So 3 votes would be a denial. So if you did a motion to continue, would that also require a supermajority?
That requires a simple majority of 4 votes.
So couldn't you contemplate a scenario where you do the majority vote to delay it or to avoid the requirements or the requirements of the legal protest?
Well, I would think that at some point this applicant would just ask to be voted up or down without a continuance. And I know the council well enough to know that the council wouldn't be making a motion to continue just to string an applicant along.
No, of course not. Okay, thank you. Thank you, parliamentarian. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Wagner, I understand where you're coming from on this. You've done everything that you need to do, but your problem is sitting over here. It's Mr. Lasota and the legal protest. And that's something we don't have control over. And so I think what we're trying to tell you is we can't be the referee between you two. That's not our role. We can't enforce an agreement like that. So what we're looking for to you to do is for you two parties to figure it out for yourselves. You can make a private agreement, says whatever you want. We can acknowledge that private agreement as we go forward, but the city can't be in a position of enforcing that agreement either for you or for Mr. Lazota's clients. So that's the reason we're asking for a continuance, is that the two parties here can figure it out between yourselves and come up with a solution, which I think all of us hope you do. But that's the situation we're in. We can't enforce your agreements with you, between the two of you.
That's understandable. Is there anybody else that wants to add to that? Because I'd like to just hear it all.
Well, the way the case is presented, I cannot support it. And I say that because I believe that your zoning as is, and in other words, I'd rather give a vote tonight up or down than, that's why I'm not going to support the continuance. I think that, I mean, that's my feeling about it. You've come down the road, a long road, and whether there's an impasse, you know, between a competitor and so forth is really hard for us to be able to look at. I also think that the downtown zoning that you have, probably you could get what you wanted with some stipulations to that versus going to the rezoning, but that's just an opinion. And right now you're pretty deep into the rezoning request. So I see no other hands to speak. The motion is to continue this item until the second meeting in January. Is that the 23rd?
Mayor Ortega, I believe Councilwoman Caputi's motion was to January 9th.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, Merry Christmas. Okay, sorry, January 9th, and please record your vote. Okay, the motion does carry, so we'll be able to see you back after the new year. Thank you so much. Hopefully some progress will be made in the meantime. Next, that concludes our regular agenda item. Next, we will go to public comment. Public comment is a second opportunity for citizens, Scottsdale businesses, owners or property owners to come forward on any non-agendized item. I'm told there is no request for public comment, therefore I will close public comment. Moving on to citizen petitions. We are allowed to bring forth petitions through the clerk's office. Seeing none, that matter is closed. At this point, I would request, well, I hope everyone has a wonderful, we'll see you tomorrow.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Please record your vote. Councilman Durham? Yep.
Yep.
Sometimes it's sticky. Thank you. We are adjourned.